Hey, Sherman, welcome to Mitiga Mic.
Hey, Brian. How's it going?
Going well, going well. So let's just start at the beginning, man. Who are you and what do you do?
Cool. So, my name is Roei Sherman. I'm the Senior Director of Research for Mitiga.
Awesome. Awesome. And so give us a little bit of background how you got into cyber. You took a little bit of a different paths than maybe some other people in the industry. So I always like hearing kind of the unique story and sort of, origin stories, if you will.
Yeah, so unfortunately or not, I don't have like the classic Cinderella story where I was young, I hacked things, and I found out I'm an amazing hacker and got into security. My story is a bit more, I would say, mellow and like easy. When I grew up, I've been around computers since I was young, but my entire interaction with computers was playing video games. That's
Yeah.
pretty much it. I did broke them from time to time, but my dad will always had somebody in his work that knew computers. He would take them over there, they would fix them, bring them back functional. Um, as I grew up, I've went the Israeli path, and after the high school, I joined the army for my mandatory service, and I haven't served in any technological unit. I did something much more, I would say, straightforward, field related. And after my mandatory service ended and I got out of the army, I wasn't really sure what I want to do for my full-time career. And I thought about computers, which was something I liked, but I was very worried to take a hobby or something I enjoy doing on my free time, making that my full-time job, and then like lose the fun of it as a hobby.
Yeah.
Started doing, I worked for Brinks, like the armored delivery, as an ATM technician. And I kept thinking I did that for around a year, and throughout that year, I thought to myself like what I want to do. And I'm coming from a security background, like classic normal security background. And I said, you know what? I really like computers. I'm pretty technical. I like security. I asked around and I found out there is an entire industry doing security for or in computers. I didn't really knew what it means or what you can do. I went to take one of those courses that are very common in Israel where they tell you pay us a bunch of money, we'll teach you to be a hacker in 6 months, and you're gonna rule the world, sort of a thing. And I started doing that, and I think after half of the course, I was certain I'm amazing. Like I know everything about security and I can do everything, breach into everything. Started sending like my CVs to places to find a job. And very fast I found out I'm not that great as I thought I am. And then I had my first job in Checkpoint as part of the help desk support personnel. When I joined that team, which most of the day you're doing troubleshooting, like normal IT work, like email doesn't work, you need to install images on computer, network issues, stuff like that. That's when I really understood that I don't know anything. Like I
Mhm.
know a lot of concepts, but nothing practical and nothing like quote unquote from the field. That's where my journey started when I learned the basics of IT, how networking is working, I would say basic protocols, troubleshooting, building a computer, a lot of those stuff. And I did that for a couple of years. And then I've moved to what was back then Checkpoint's cloud services. Basically, it was the very old version of a cloud where you have a lot of, I would say, servers installed in different data centers across the world that provide
Yeah.
a service to your customers. I was one of the Linux admins there. That's where I learned a lot about IT from the Linux side of the things. And after 3 years with Checkpoint, I've so during my time in Checkpoint, I've met a person that was leading the Checkpoint research team. And I've met him in a funny way. There was an incident. Everybody was running wild, like what's going on, what happened. It automatically opened the ticket to the help desk, and which got assigned to me. I went into the server room. I identified the port that was causing the trouble, and I didn't really knew anything, so I just unplugged it. Like, like now no more attacks. Nothing is plugged. Then I got called in where the CISO and a bunch of other managers started yelling at me that I've just ruined everything. I have no idea what I'm doing. Nobody told me to unplug it. That's not how you deal with an incident. I wasn't really sure like what's going on. But then he stepped in the room and he said, "Who unplugged the cable?" And I raised my hand thinking, "Oh, great. Another person to yell at me." And he's like, "Great job. That's exactly what we needed. Kudos on the fast thinking, and thank you." The room was
Wow.
entirely silent,
Wow.
and I wasn't really sure like why it was a good idea. Like it was just like an intuition for me. Um, but then when speaking with him, I heard what he was doing. He was leading the research team. He had a very very long background in security, and I told him that I want to get into security. I want to learn about more technical stuff, different roles. Back then, my dream position was doing forensics.
Mm.
And he told me, "All right, I'm not going to teach you, but I can guide you and you can teach yourself like all of us are doing." And I'm like, I have no idea what that means. So he said, "I'm going to give you a file. You take it back home, take a week, and come back with everything you can tell me about that file." And I said, "All right, cool." And I was expecting like a Word document with like informations and questions, stuff I can Google. And I got a pickup file. And I'm like, I know that's like network recording. We use it like for troubleshooting, but what do you mean tell you everything I know about it? He's like, that pickup contains a real attack. Tell me what happened. Who attacked who, how, like whatever you can. And back then we didn't have ChatGPT, so I had to do everything manual. And I started doing that. And as we went forward, he taught me like more stuff and more bits. After 3 years in Checkpoint, I've tried to get into EY as a pen tester. The first time around, I wasn't accepted. I said like, all right, I don't know nothing, and I'm really bad at what I do. So I'll just stay in IT. And I think around 6 months later, they had those positions open again, and my wife pushed me, and she said, "You need to apply again. You learn more, you train more, and if they don't get you, you just stay in the same position you're currently right now, so you don't have anything to lose." And as the smart person she is, I followed her advice. I submitted my CVs again. I got to the interview, and this time around, I was able to answer a lot of more questions around security, and pen testing and offensive stuff, and I got accepted. I started as a pen tester with EY, went through the web application security training, and everybody other than me came from technical units from the army. So everybody knew a lot of stuff. They knew how to write code and how to code HTML stuff. And I'm like, all of this is new to me. I never did any of those things.
Yeah.
Um, but at the exam that you have at the end of the training in EY, you get an app that one of the high managers developed themselves that has multiple different vulnerabilities, and you need to pen test it and write the report. And I said, like, I have to find something nobody else found. Like, I won't give up. And I stayed up at nights, and I'm very competitive as a person. And eventually, I managed to find an RCE, like a remote code execution on that app. Nobody had it. And I'm so excited. I'm gonna document everything. I'm gonna figure out how it works. The next day, somebody told him that I found an RCE, and his response was, "We don't have an RCE." And I'm like, but that's the code I ran. And he came in and he said we like to figure out how I found it. And he's like, "Great job. I had no idea this vulnerability exists, and it's not something that we coded in. It's something in one of the frameworks." So that was a lot of fun for me, and like a small win that even though I don't have your background, I still managed like to push myself. Fast forward, I spent around 5 or so years in EY. I started doing the infrastructure pen test, which I came from as an IT person, so it was much easier for me.
Yeah.
Moved forward to be a part of the red team, led one of the red teams, and then I moved to Anheuser-Busch InBev. They decided they want to build an internal red team, and they reached out to me. And back then, it was one of my dreams, like to build my own red team, the way I see how red team should be done, um, and build it sort of in the image that I believe is the right one. I joined AB InBev as a red team architect. Then my manager left, and I got promoted to the red team manager. And again, fast forward 5 years, I've left ABI before joining Mitiga as the global director for offensive services. And the time in ABI was amazing. I had the best bosses, and they went with most of the crazy ideas I had, and when we built the team, we brought in very good operators, and we were starting as a team that does like the red team that the company was used to get from external consultants. But very, very fast, they saw the benefits of a team that has an adversarial mindset that can be applied even outside of common cybersecurity. And we work very closely with our blue team, and we managed to conduct very wide and extensive operations to simulate real threat actors and real campaigns. The team grew from the red team to the offensive services department that at one time we had our own pen test team doing only the pen test. We were being brought in different crises and different conversations with different teams as the bad guy, basically, which is the real essence of a red team, like somebody that can tell you how things can go wrong and how bad guys are going to abuse whatever you just built or did for their own benefit. um, and it was a great ride. I learned so much about the big companies and different departments, especially on marketing, and had the good times of hiring the people, training the people, and kind of mold them to the red teaming concept that I truly believed in, that are a bit different than the common one you see in the market.
Yeah.
And then 2 years ago, I joined Mitiga, started as the field CTO, and a few months ago moved to run our research team.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. You know, it's funny when I hear your story, there's something there that a lot of people, including myself, I think have in common. It was sort of their aha moment. And that's looking at packet captures, whether it's running Snoop on like Solaris or TCP dump, or even back in the day when you had a McAfee or Network Associates, physical box that you'd actually go ahead and plug in. There's something about seeing the packets, I think, and then that leads into piping them to grep, set, and awk, and a little bit of standard Unix commands, and then maybe some scripting around it with Python. It's kind of like a jump off point. And it's like if you skateboard, it's analogous to learning how to ollie. And then once you learn that, everything else you kind of pick up after that. So I think that's funny. Something about seeing packets, like seeing this is what's actually happening, is that seems to be a very common denominator for people in our field. So there's certainly something there, I think.
On the other side, it can be very intimidating, where the first thing you see is something so detailed. Like you
Yeah.
have so many different fields, so many different types of content. Nothing is very self-explanatory, and
And it
the
definitely teaches you
Wireshark.
TCP/IP really quickly because you start to learn, okay,
Mhm.
headers and encapsulation and what's UDP versus TCP and ICMP. It actually makes sense instead of just the theory that you might have read, right?
Yeah, and it's like the Swiss Army knife. So it has so much functionality that
Yeah.
it's a very steep learning curve, but that's what makes people that know how to use Wireshark so effective and advanced.
Yeah.
Because once you go through that learning curve, you're so effective in dissecting network traffic, and that can be applied to anything from common networking debugging up to actual malicious traffic analysis. And then you bring in the plugins, the filters, all the automation you can think of, which makes you pretty much unstoppable when it comes to network, which is the basic thing for every technology, like from connecting to different pieces of technology up to full cloud environments.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. All right, on. Well, let's pivot a little bit because you have this amazing background. You came over to Mitiga. We've started this fantastic research team, which is makes up part of Mitiga Labs as well. But tell me, what's the main focus? What's the mission for you and your team? What are you guys doing?
So I would say, to put it very short and sweet, in my opinion, is to make a bad guy day much worse.
Mm,
And it comes from when I was on the offensive side. Everything you think of are two main things. How do I achieve the objectives of my operation? And bundle with that is that how somebody gonna try and stop me. And that's the basic thing that go through your mind. And then moving from the offense to defense, I'm thinking the same thing. And I don't distinguish if it's a red team operator doing an operation for a client, or a threat actor doing their own operation. From our eyes, an attacker is an attacker, and we need to catch all of them and surface everything they do. And I don't think security will ever be perfect, so we nothing will be able to stop all the attacks all the time, in every place. However, what I do believe in is that we can increase the friction of attackers when they go into an environment. We can make them slower. We can make them double and triple think the next step they're gonna take. And the slower we make them and the more doubt we make them have in each step, increases our chances of catching them earlier and reducing the blast radius of what they're gonna do. And I think that's a core idea that always I was following. Meaning, I know the sort of paradigm or a cliche where defenders' life are harder because they have to be right 100% of the time, and attacker needs to be right only 1% of the time. And that's something I really disagree with, because first of all, I know defenders that weren't right 100% of the time and still managed to catch most of the attacks, or the majority of them, or all of them so far. And on the other hand, once you establish a foothold as the attacker, that paradigm shifts, because now when I'm operating in their environment, I have to be right 100% of the time, quote unquote, because every mistake I'm going to make is something that can uncover what I'm doing, what I did, where I did it, what I was trying to achieve. And the sooner that happens, the more I lose and the more they win. So they might miss one activity I had, but caught me on the other one, which took down my entire chain of operations. And I think that's something that leads us as the research team in multiple avenues. First, how they think as the attackers, like what the attackers want to do, how they're going to do that. That can lead us to research new ways of doing different things. So either finding vulnerabilities with different cloud service providers, looking at how tools the attacker use are operating and executing different types of attacks, and of course, reading about what they already did and was discovered, and seeing what comes back again and again from either different actors to the same environments, or different victims, and kind of figure out the attacker mindset, or I would say attacker goals.
yeah. One of the things I really love about what you and your team do is you're not just looking at the cloud. For example, you're not just looking at AWS. First of all, you're looking at multi-cloud. You're looking across all the disparate cloud providers. Then you're looking at all the identity providers, which is a subset of SaaS, but it's a really important one, almost a standalone one to say you look at identity. And then there's the gazillion SaaS applications as well, the big ones, from Snowflake and Workday to GitHub to Bob's backyard SaaS application and everything in between. And all the disparate log formats, and the ones that do log and then the log changed from yesterday, and the ones that have horrible logging, and the ones that you really have to spend a lot of time to decipher it because it's really not well documented. And there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle that come into play to just get to the starting point of doing the analytics. And your team is just so efficient and so effective at that. And one of the hardest areas, I mean, doing it for on-prem solutions is tough. I don't want to take anything away from that, but doing it for a cloud-centric environment, man, it's unforgiving. So is there like a story or two, or maybe something that stands out in your mind of like something really complex or really interesting that you encountered, and sort of how you and the team overcame that?
So I'm very lucky to get a very, very, very talented group of people that's working with me in research. They are creative, relentless, and ruthless, and that combination makes them so good at what they do. And we, as part of working with, as you mentioned, multiple different platforms, you don't really have any uniformity in structure or content.
Mm,
Even the same type of log would be built very differently between different vendors. So it doesn't matter if you look at very close types of services in SaaS. Let's say you look at Dropbox and Box, which essentially are servicing for the same type of usage.
sure.
Their logs are very different. The content is different, the structure is different, the details are different. And even when you go and that can even range as you go for the bigger platforms like cloud service provider like AWS, Azure, GCP, they have a lot of different logs that come from a lot of different places and a lot of different services, and eventually are bundled into one big log that you need sort of slice and dice. But I would say one of the most interesting ones, and recently published a blog post about it, was the Salesforce log.
Mm,
So, without going into too much technical details, Salesforce have multiple and different types of log sources, and we saw that, let's look at two main ones. One looks at login events when people log in into Salesforce to do whatever they do, and the other one contains the actual activity within Salesforce.
okay.
So let's say you, Brian, you're going into Salesforce, you want to download a report. So one log will have the login event where you logged in,
Yeah.
but your report searches or downloads or exports or shares will be in an entirely different log source. So first of all, that would be the first challenge.
Yeah.
You need to figure out which log sources a platform have and what they
What are
contain.
linked? Yeah, for sure.
Exactly. Then when you bring them in, you find out, unfortunately, that the activity log doesn't have any usernames or names at all. Meaning, when you look at an activity, let's say you downloaded a report of your expected either churn or something sensitive for a company. In the log itself, instead of Brian, I'll have a unique string that doesn't make any sense, just a random string of letters and numbers. And for the report, I'll have something called report ID, which is again a random string that's either unique but still not very indicative. And if you're a SOC analyst and you're bringing those logs into your SIM, what can an analyst do when they say, all right, somebody downloaded something? Like in most cases, the analyst will go to the actual platform to look at the logs or like trying
Yeah.
to figure it out. But as we know, Salesforce is not a security platform. So I would bet that the vast majority of analysts doesn't even have access to Salesforce in their organization because it's not one of the things they do.
Yep.
And then when we said, all right, we're going to build detections, we looked at it and when we said, like, that won't be useful telling somebody downloaded something. It's only confuses you more because you can't really determine if that makes sense or not. You can't even ask somebody if this makes sense or not, or validate with the actual user if they intended to do that. Um, and you can't even determine the criticality because there is a difference if you're downloading a document that says something not very confidential or critical, or if you're downloading the most confidential report the company have. And we said, all right, we got to figure out a way around this. And then we found out the other log that has the login issues. And then the team sat down and came with a very um not only classic but very beautiful and simple solution on how we can pull the log events that have both the user ID, which is the unique string, but also the actual username.
Mhm.
We can have from a different source the report name and the report IDs, build our own sort of a mapping content of each one that we can identify. And then when we have the event from the second log of somebody doing something, we can use placeholders and say, all right, if that's user ID, we can map it to our mappings. And then we say, all right, we know Brian just downloaded a report for the next half year expected churn, something like that. And when you give that to the analyst, they don't need to go into the platform or find a way to try and get into the platform. And it's very easy for them to reach out to Brian using their own comms and means and saying, hey, man, we just saw this was downloaded or this was shared externally or anything like that. Is this something you should be doing, shouldn't be doing? If it violates policies or anything like that, makes it much more useful for them.
Awesome. Awesome. You know, that's, and it's not like Salesforce is an unusual, obscure application, you know, and it's just representative of so many large enterprise, you know, level apps out there that people are using. You know, you can throw Workday in there, you can throw Slack in there, and everything else that people are using, and it's just, it's great that there's people like you and the research team at Mitiga to do that type of analytics, because it's really hard work. But once you get it mapped and once you get it running, man, is it valuable. And I've heard that directly from customers. For anybody listening and you'd like to check out the blog that Sherman was referencing, please go to mitiga.io. You can certainly check out our blog while there and all the different blogs that we've written, but also be sure to check out Mitiga Labs as well, which is a subset of Sherman's team and some other teams within the organization doing some really incredible work and really incredible research. So with that said, Sherman, thank you so much for being part of Mitiga Mic. Thank you for sharing your journey and telling us a little bit more about what you and your team do here at Mitiga.
Sure, every time. Thanks so much for having me.